A new rule released by the Trump administration this week blows a huge hole in what's known as the contraceptive mandate, the policy established during the Obama years that requires employer health plans to provide birth control coverage with no copay. Specifically, the Trump rule would allow employers to request an exemption from the mandate for, quote, religious or moral reasons. Jamila Taylor, a senior fellow for women's health at the Center for American Progress, joins me to unpack what the rule really means. Jamila, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca.
So first, walk us through the basics here. How did the contraceptive mandate work when it was established under the Obama years, so basically before this week? And what effect does Trump's announcement this week have?
So what the Affordable Care Act did was it made contraceptive coverage to the point where women do not have to pay any out-of-pocket costs. And so this has been really important, particularly for most women in this country that use contraception, because we know that the costs associated, whether it's with a pack of pills or with an IUD, has been prohibitive for women in the past. And, you know, it's also made it easier for women in terms of access to contraception. We know that when women don't have access to contraception, it makes them more susceptible to unplanned pregnancies. So it was a really important development as part of preventive health services that were offered under the ACA.
A lot of people jokingly, I'm often one of them. When I pick up my birth control from CVS, I'll often say, thanks, Obama, right? Because I'm getting it without a copay.
Absolutely.
And that's important for a lot of us. But as you note, it's especially important for people for whom access to contraception effectively is not within their reach if it comes with a price tag.
Right, absolutely. And even for a person like me, you know, a middle-class woman, you know, with a great career, not having to pay those costs has also been helpful for me. So really across the board, no matter if a woman has economic hardship or not, this was really an important development in terms of access to reproductive health care. We know that women were actually able to save $1.4 billion in the first year alone once this was implemented. So it's been absolutely huge, not only for women's health, but also their economic security.
So what does the rule actually mean? What is it going to do? Who's it going to affect?
So basically what the rule does, I mean, you know, here at CAP, we're looking at it as really a rollback of the contraceptive mandate. It's going to allow any person, insurance plan, employer, even a university that may be offering healthcare coverage to students to say, you know, to really put their personal decisions or personal, I think, views over that of the women that need access to contraception. So it's offering them basically a license to discriminate and deny access to contraceptive coverage. We don't currently know exactly how many women this is going to impact, but we're thinking it's going to be upwards of hundreds of thousands of women.
The administration has said, oh, we actually don't think that many women are going to be impacted. They've come out with numbers that are a lot lower than that. But you're arguing that this is actually going to be wide-scale impact felt by a lot of folks. Is that because there's not just an exemption possible for religious reasons, something that we've seen in a lot of different contexts? This has been a theme throughout this administration and from conservatives more generally. But is it because of the inclusion of this wishy-washy moral reasons piece in the language?
Right, absolutely. I think another thing that we should pick out here is the fact that, you know, currently there is a process for, you know, employers to have an accommodation, you know, in terms of covering contraceptive care. And under the rules, you know, that is not going to be required. So anyone could make a claim, you know, that they you know, have some sort of issue with offering contraceptive coverage for any host of reasons. And again, as you mentioned, the moral objection piece is squishy because there really is no definition of that. It's not something that is actually protected in the law. So it's really going to be a mess, basically. And I think for us and the work that we're doing is that I just keep thinking about the women that may not be knowledgeable about this or what's happening, and then they go in to get access to contraceptive contraceptive care, thinking that they have it covered, and they don't. And again, that is going to be extremely harmful, hard on the pocketbook for millions of women.
We've had this conversation, I can't even count how many times on the show, but I always feel that it's important to remind, and that I would be remiss if I didn't, of the many benefits of birth control. Mm-hmm. First, there's the obvious. It helps women plan if and when to have children, which can allow them to obtain an education, to work, to achieve financial stability, and so forth. Survey after survey puts numbers to this. Mm-hmm. But it's also critical to women's health in a variety of other ways that have nothing to do with family planning. Talk a little bit about that and what this could mean for women, not just in terms of their choices over their own body.
Absolutely. So we know that there are some 1 million women in this country that actually use contraception for medical reasons. So that could be to control, conditions like endometriosis, control or regulate their periods, any host of medical reasons. And so if we sort of look beyond, just controlling, whether or not they get pregnant, there are also a host of medical reasons. And at the end of the day, we should not be imposing restrictions on access to contraception, which is like any other medication or prescription that people have, and we're not doing it for other things, so it just goes to show you, along with some of the other actions of this administration, that they really are focused on discriminating against women. And
it's not just a few women either who are taking contraceptives for purposes like you were describing, whether endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome or a whole range of things. It's 58% of women who take oral contraceptives for reasons other than contraception. So this is not a small number of folks.
It's not a small number of folks. And I think another thing that we need to keep in mind when we're sort of unpacking this issue is the fact that 62 million women in this country have been able to benefit from, this contraceptive coverage mandate. So this is not a small thing. This is huge. I'll also add that women are angry and they're upset and they're ready to fight, to beat this back. And so, I think that, again, this sort of just goes along with the theme that we've seen from this administration in terms of their efforts to roll back access to reproductive health care for women.
Well, and that's a great segue into something else that happened this week. It wasn't just the contraceptive mandate rollback that we've been talking about, but quietly, Trump's Department of Health and Human Services also dropped a serious bomb that a lot of people haven't really even paid attention to yet because it's still 2017 and the House is still on fire. And that's that HHS actually released it's called a draft strategic plan. This is customary for agencies to release. It has to do with sort of their goals and how they're going to accomplish their mission. And hidden in that draft strategic plan was actually a statement that, in the view of HHS, now in 2017 under Trump, life begins at conception. What's the significance of that addition to HHS's strategic plan and mission document?
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, I'll just say that is completely ridiculous that statement is included in, a government document, a guidance document from the Department of Health and Human Services. But what it's going to potentially do is open up the floodgates for funding and supporting organizations, that are essentially anti-choice, that are not providing women with reliable, medically accurate information about, their education or even their options in terms of reproductive health care. So it's extremely problematic. It's just a shame that this administration is sort of, using this conservative ideology to sort of run the government and sort of to help ingrain that in, everything, that they are doing, which is really pretty awful.
Conservatives often like to say that they care about evidence-based policy, right? This is one of the things that makes me bang my head against the wall, perhaps more than anything.
It's BS, if I can say that.
Well, you just did. But you know what? We're not going to edit it out because you're right.
It is right. It is right, because nothing that they do is based in science or evidence.
When particularly in this space, right? If you're going to talk about supporting abstinence-only education, for example, something that we have all the evidence in the world to show doesn't work and backfires majorly, right? The same is true with the risk of potentially funding these so-called clinics that you were, one of the examples of what you were just describing. Tell me in just the minute that we have left, you know a lot about these faux clinics
I do.
that really exist to try to prevent women from accessing their rights under Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I can say that from personal experience. I actually went to a place which later, I figured out was a pregnancy crisis center. But initially, I was thinking that it was a place that I could go to as a woman who was pregnant, thinking that I could get, the full array of information that I needed to decide, how I wanted to move forward with my pregnancy. And it was not like that. The information that I received was very targeted and focused on continuing on with the pregnancy, to the point where, it was just, they were very persuasive and pushing me into one direction as opposed to the other. When I did ask about options for abortion, they were not willing or able probably to give me the information that I needed. So, and these, fake clinics, as I would call them, they're operating all over the country, and they continue to give women misguided information about their pregnancy options.
And a real risk, as you noted, that they could become government funded.
They could
the way this draft strategic plan is written.
Right, absolutely. And then we probably don't have time to even get into the fact that, you sort of go into these places, again, rooted in this ideology. And let's say women go in there and they decide to continue on with those pregnancies. Conservatives don't want to be helpful in terms of when those children are born, with the services and support that they need. We continue to see efforts to cut programs like SNAP and WIC, even efforts to restrict access to maternity care for women. So this really is a broader, I think, strategy, particularly, I think, focused at low-income people, particularly in this country.
I want to close with some words from Anna North, a reporter at Fox, who wrote about the rollback this week of the contraceptive mandate. She writes, "One thing is just as true now as it was in the 19th century. You can have state or corporate control over pregnancy, or you can have a healthy, productive, and free female citizenry, but you can't have both."